Before we start this review, let me say I'm a bit of a Whovian. Of all the things I had autographed, the only thing not D&D related was Tomb of the Cybermen when I met Fraser Hines at Comic Palooza. Okay, my friend Misha got it for me because I'm too cheap to pay for autographs, and as a thank you for introducing her to Boris and Julie, whom she squeed on for 5 minutes, she got his autograph. But Doctor Who was special for 8-year-old me. Science fiction was all lightsabers and phasers until that point in my life. But here was this quirky British chap defeating giant robots, killer trash cans, and blob monsters made from bubble wrap and Vaseline, not with weapons, but by outsmarting them. He was funny, he was scary, and he didn't care. He was just as likely to offer you a jelly baby as threaten to chase you off the planet. Doctor Who stands as one of the greatest science fiction TV shows ever created, even with its recent issues. But how does that work as a game? It's been tried several times, with FASA being the first. Does this box set fall short, or is it bigger on the inside? I'm Mr. Welch, and today we are musing over the Doctor Who role-playing game. The is important. Yeah, that video clip is going to be going for a while. I've even forgotten several box sets when I was grabbing my collection, so Series 5 and 11 are in there for those keeping track at home. For those not familiar with Doctor Who, shame on you. Go binge watch the entire series right now. I'll see you in just over a month. Not kidding, the show has been around for 60 years now, and if you were to watch every episode, it would take approximately 5 weeks according to the nerd channels. And that includes the lost episodes. In short, Doctor Who is a Time Lord from the planet of Gallifrey. He likes to jump around in his magic blue box everywhere and every wind to solve problems, usually with an attractive young woman as his companion. Or as one of the best-written episodes explained,
he burns at the center of time and he can see the turn of the universe. And he's wonderful.
Thank you, Tim. When he gets injured or when the BBC gets tired of the actor playing him, he regenerates into a new version with his own personality and quirks. Okay, I can talk your ear off about Doctor Who all day. I'll save my thoughts on the show until the last part of this video, so people can actually learn about the game instead. The Doctor Who role-playing game was created by FASA in 1985 as a box set, with Michael Bledsoe getting the design credit, with writing credits attributed to John Wheeler and Guy McLemore, and illustrations by David Keith and Dave Marsh, though much of the book is photographs from the show. It came in a 3-book box set with the GM's book, Player's Guide, and a lore book. And this is very much a FASA product, as the page layout is classic Battletech. And those who have the old books will know exactly what I'm talking about. That's not a good thing or a bad thing, that's a FASA thing. The game says it's based on the old Star Trek RPG.
But it's nothing like that.
This game uses D6s with a stat skill system and has a success matrix rather than a simple check against your skill level. The question people had when discovering this game was, does it capture the magic of the show? That is, the show up until the 5th Doctor. At this point in time, nobody ever thought it was going to go on hiatus after the BBC spiked it, or get a successful relaunch, and then get driven back into the ground by bad writing.
Stay on target.
Keep the commentary until the end. For people who grew up on the re-release, this one's going to be a bit confusing because it's back in the day when the show's budget was whatever change they could dig out of the couch that week. The issue is that Doctor Who centers around a central character with the help of his companions, and RPGs usually don't work that way. People want to share the spotlight, which is exactly the opposite of how the show works. The game does try to get around this by letting the characters be time agents, but it's not the same, is it? The answer is no, that wasn't a rhetorical question. You have 6 stats in the game: strength, endurance, dexterity, charisma, mentalism, and intelligence. It's the D&D stats, with mentalism replacing wisdom as your mental strength. The stats for normal people range from 6 to 10, with companions being of superior stock and having ranges of 10 to 15, and Time Lords can go off the charts if they get enough experience. There's a list of skills, but you don't have to buy them, you start with all of them. But unless you put points in them, they count as unskilled and you suck when trying to use them. Character creation is roll 2 dice, add in your points kicker, and divide that between your attributes. It's that simple. Spend your skill points, and if you have special powers, roll on the special powers chart. This is mainly for Time Lords, and even then some of the results get you nothing. There's a chance the rest of the party will be overshadowed in the case of really good rolls compared to having no special abilities. Skills have a proficiency range from 1 to 7, with the first level being untrained all the way up to Master. No, not that Master. There are 2 races to choose from initially, despite the massive amount of creatures that have been introduced in the setting. Remember, the Unearthly Child originally debuted the weekend of the Kennedy assassination. The show had been going strong for 20 years before this game came out. But like the show itself, there's a lot of rights issues that plague it until this very day. This is obvious when they have separate copyrights in the credits for Terry Nation and the Daleks. Your races are Time Lords and humans. That's it. You can't play a Thal, an Ood, a Jadoon, or even the good-aligned cousin of the mighty Jagrafas or the holy Hadrajasic Max Radinfo. It's just those two options. Doctor Who really didn't do non-human companions well. Except for K9, Madame Vastra, and Frobisher the Shape-Changing Penguin. Okay, he had a lot of non-human help, but they still aren't in this game. You can add them in the Game Master's Guide, but the rules are pretty much wing it. Still, if you want to play a shape-changing robot, you can work it out with the Game Master. And hope the guy that knows how you work doesn't die and nobody can figure out the controls. Never understood how they couldn't come up with a plausible replacement for a robot that shape-changes, so they had the Doctor strangle him. A robot. The Doctor strangles a robot.
Stay on target.
No, don't geek out. Save that till the end. The game mechanics revolve around the skill matrix. It's like the time matrix, but a bit more complicated. Just cross-reference your ability score with your skill aptitude level, roll that number or higher on 2d6. 3 or higher gets you a critical success, 3 or less on a failure gets you a critical failure. Simple, right? Then add every advantage and disadvantage both you and the GM can justify, then slide the actual difficulty to the appropriate line for the real target. This means rolling a skill check can turn into a negotiation session as you try to wrangle every possible bonus you can. Are you trying to sneak past the guard to infiltrate a base? You gain a one-line adjustment if you manage to acquire a Girl Scout uniform so you can claim that you're selling cookies. Gain another positive adjustment if you happen to have Girl Scout cookies to sell. Another bonus if you give the guard a discount on his box of cookies. But then the Game Master issues penalties, like if you look too old to be a Girl Scout, like if you're posing as a young teenager and you're actually born in the Paleozoic period. You would take massive penalties if you have an obvious physical trait that gives away your deception, like if you can't explain to the guard why you're 8 stories tall. That would shift the difficulty several positions and make the roll almost impossible, and you're not going to be able to get your tree 50 from him. While the skill system is a bit more fluid than it needs to be, combat is a bit of an afterthought. The Doctor usually doesn't get into combat, unless you're John Pertwee. But he was more of a space James Bond. Combat is meant to be one-on-one in Doctor Who, and most of the bad guys are far more overpowered than the characters. And you're supposed to defeat them with trickery and guile.
Shot for the wings there. 5 rounds rapid.
Sorry, Brig. Outsmarting them is the time-honored method of the day. The Doctor is the smartest man in the room pretending to be the dumbest man in the room. That's not easy to roleplay. The Game Master has his job cut out for him in this version. There is a short section in the book detailing the more famous monsters of Doctor Who, but aside from the Dalek, Cybermen, and the Master, nobody else gets their own source books. You've got small blurbs on Ice Warriors, Sontarans, Silurians, and the Rutans, but not much. Wait a minute, Rutans only got a single appearance in Horror of Fang Rocked, and they get included but not the Great Intelligence?
Stay on target.
Right. So many of the classic Doctor Who bad guys aren't mentioned at all in the box set, and nothing past the 5 Doctors means there aren't going to be any Weeping Angels, Slitheen, Silence, Vashta Narada, or the writers of the last few targets.
Stay on target.
I'm trying. You can play as time agents, but there's very little lore on the history of the human empires and Doctor Who in this game. You don't get any mention of the great and bountiful human empires, the evacuation of Earth, and certainly not the Time War. The concept is the same. You show up in a period of time on Earth or on another planet, you find out something has gone wibbly-wobbly, and you fix it. Similar to the core concept of the show, except you aren't playing second fiddle to a centuries-old Time Lord who's going to do most of the heavy lifting for you. Unless it's the first Doctor who needs Ian to do the actual heavy lifting. But that's beside the point. You can also have an all-Time Lord party, but those are stated to be quite rare and will overpower many of the adventures just from their built-in powers and experience. Even in the show, Time Lord team-ups were pretty rare, except when they sent Romana off with the Doctor for a few series. That creates one of the biggest problems in the game. Your options are, have one character vastly more powerful than the rest of the party, have the entire party be incredibly powerful and have the GM struggle to make adventures that can threaten them, or play boring old humans doing things the Doctor should be doing. Any game that has wildly different power levels is going to be a problem, and while it mentions that Time Lords are capable of greater stats, it doesn't explain what the issues will be. But as I mentioned earlier, a capable human has stats reaching 15, and a Time Lord can go up to 30. See the problem? The game has a box set and 3 source books. You can get all of them online for not much more than the list price. Several adventures were printed, and these aren't that hard to find or cost that much. The game is a curiosity more than a useful system. It's not like the Star Wars RPG, where everybody has a role in the party and nobody's spending all their time building a TARDIS over and over again. People who get this RPG are die-hard Whovians who want everything with a TARDIS on the cover. That being said, the thick parchment binders on the books that made them look older are very nice. And it smells like a 40-year-old book now, meaning it's almost intoxicating. Good book or bad, a musty book smell is always nice. It's a game that doesn't even come close to its potential when it was released. You can't judge it for its lack of content from today's lens. They had no way of knowing the show was going to last for another 40 years past that. When this game was released, there were only a third of the total Doctors they could write about, though they did include a few more Doctors with later adventures. They had no idea there would be 15 Doctors when we wrote this. Or 50 if you count the Timeless Children.
Stay on target.
How many TV shows have lasted multiple decades? But they didn't include much from the 20-year span they had to play with. I would imagine this was because of licensing, which has been an issue with the show since the second serial. It doesn't help that the rules are clunky. Most people want more action-oriented games. And Whovians are a niche audience. People are only going to buy this for the collection. Is the review done? Can I geek out now? Can I have an unseemly outburst?
Unseemly outbursts?
Doctor Who has died in the past. I am very aware of the gap between the 8th and 9th Doctors. Technically, it died with the 7th Doctor as the head of BBC sabotaged the show in the 80s because they wanted something new. They even fired Colin Baker as a way to punish the showrunner. He's the only Doctor I've ever met, and it's hard to believe a guy that likable and funny had to play the most abrasive version of the Doctor. There is an ongoing flame war happening in the fandom that can't be denied because of the plummeting ratings, and some really poor decisions the showrunners have made in the past few seasons. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Doctor Who lost me in the 3rd season of Capaldi, and probably the 2nd season. He's a great actor, but the scripts they gave him were not the best. When they gave him something to work with, he knocked it out of the park, like heaven sent. But then they followed up with the clunker Hell Bent. Jodie Whittaker didn't even get anything close to being a classic episode, and Gotway's run might have put this classic on hiatus until they find somebody who knows what they're doing behind the scenes. And I put it all on the showrunners and writers. They've devolved into cheap nostalgia bait for too many episodes. They replaced classic science fiction writers with people who were credited with drama and romance, and it shows. They made a big deal about giving us the first woman Doctor and the first black Doctor, but couldn't be bothered with giving them any decent scripts. You introduce first for a TV show when it's at its strengths, not when it's struggling in the ratings. Then they started giving us the callbacks from the past, and it fizzled. Bringing back Tom Baker for the 50th anniversary is great because it's a special episode, but special guest stars every other episode lessens the impact. Does anybody remember this season when we had the Master as the villain every episode? Then they stopped using him for some time because the fans were tired of him. If you want to give Susan her time in the spotlight, then make it an episode, not a 10-second cameo. They brought back David Tennant as the 14th Doctor for 3 episodes, and I can't remember a thing about them except that idiotic 2-Doctor split that they reused 2 years later, and it was just as dumb. They throw us the member berries, recasting William Hartnell with David Bradley, who did a masterful job as the first Doctor, but then they made him almost insufferable and condescending. They show us all the old stuff and rub our faces in it by rewriting the lore we know and love with the Timeless Children. Even the people that supported Whittaker now admit that he was mostly pandering. Now they have the Doctor regenerate into Rose, and I'm not sold that she's the actual Doctor because they didn't do the As the Doctor tagline they always do in a regeneration. It all comes across as weak stunt casting. Don't get me wrong, I love Billie Piper, and she's a fantastic actress. But our last 4 Doctors were the first woman Doctor, the return of the most popular recent Doctor, the first black Doctor, and the return of the original New Who companion. I don't care about stunt casting. I want decent scripts. I want returning characters to have substantive episodes and not nostalgia-baiting cameos. Doctor Who is equal parts action, horror, and comedy. When it loses track of that formula, the show suffers. The 3rd Doctor got into fights almost every single episode. The 6th Doctor was way too dark for most people. Even Tom Baker's later years were just goofy. Now we get a Doctor who likes to sing and cry, and that's not the Doctor people want to watch. At least break up the themes with some new scripts, and finish the bloody storylines. Something Moffat was notorious for not doing. Does anybody remember the hybrid? Whatever became of him or her or that or whatever it was supposed to be? They brought in Danny Pink as a love interest and foil, but all he ever got was dunked on by the Doctor, who didn't like soldiers for the same reason and waxed fondly for the Brigadier. Then they killed Danny off with a phone call, off-screen. He wasn't the best companion, but man, they did him dirty. Doctor Who needs a new showrunner. It needs science fiction writers. It needs to go back to its old formula. I don't think Billie Piper can save the show without all of that. If they brought in Gary Oldman as the Doctor, the greatest actor of all time, he couldn't save it if they're going to give him the scripts that they gave to Gotwa. In short, stop with the current stories. Please, as a longtime Whovian.
No more.
Next Mad Musings is Dagger Hardy, the latest D&D killer in theory. But what's it really like? But until then, run.